He monitored her every move, ready to make an arrest. But when she picked up her 3-year-old twin daughters from a neighbor and tucked them into a car with broken windows, his badge suddenly felt heavy. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The snow lashed against the windows of the elegant Thompson real estate office, creating a crystalline pattern that matched the knot in Tasha Williams's stomach. Outside, Lakeshore Drive was a blur of headlights and snowflakes, Chicago's skyline obscured by winter's early darkness. Inside, warmth and wealth surrounded her, Italian marble floors, mahogany paneling, and the subtle scent of expensive cologne. Tasha's fingers trembled as she clutched her small handbag. At 23, she was younger than most law students at Northwestern, having earned her scholarship through relentless determination. Today, however, she felt like a child, terrified, uncertain, and desperately hoping for reassurance. The receptionist glanced at her with barely concealed disdain. "Mr. Thompson will see you now." Taking a deep breath, Tasha stood, smoothing her modest dress, the nicest she owned, purchased during a clearance sale for interviews. She followed the clicking heels across the polished floor, each step carrying her closer to a conversation that would change her life forever. Robert Thompson looked up when she entered, his expression shifting from professional to personal. At 28, he carried himself with the entitled confidence of old money and Ivy League education. His office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, spoke of generational wealth. "Tasha," he said, rising slightly, "this is unexpected. I thought we agreed to meet Friday." "We did," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "But something came up that couldn't wait." He gestured to the leather chair across from his desk. When the door closed behind them, his demeanor softened slightly. "You look beautiful, as always." 8 months ago, that comment would have made her blush with pleasure. They'd met at a charity fundraiser where she'd been working as a waitress to supplement her scholarship. He'd slipped her his business card with a $100 tip and a note, "Too beautiful to be serving others." Their relationship had been a whirlwind since: expensive restaurants, weekend trips, nights in luxury hotels. A fairy tale, she'd thought. "Robert," she began, her heart pounding, "we need to talk about our future." Something flickered in his eyes, annoyance perhaps, but his smile remained. "Our future? That sounds serious." With trembling fingers, Tasha reached into her bag and pulled out the pregnancy test, placing it carefully on his immaculate desk. 2 pink lines, unmistakable. "I'm pregnant," she said, the words hanging between them. Robert stared at the plastic stick as if it were a venomous snake. The smile evaporated from his face, replaced by an expression Tasha had never seen before: cold, calculating, distant. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice suddenly hollow. "I took 3 tests, all positive. I'm about 6 weeks along." Robert pushed his chair back slightly, creating physical distance between himself and the news. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "This is," he began, then stopped. "This is unexpected." Tasha leaned forward, hope still alive in her chest. "I know it's a shock. It was for me too. But I've been thinking—" "What exactly have you been thinking?" Robert interrupted, his tone sharp enough to make her flinch. "About us. About the baby. About our future together," she said, the words tumbling out. "I know it's sooner than we planned, but—" "Future?" He laughed, a sound so cold and unfamiliar that Tasha physically recoiled. "What future, Tasha? We don't have a future." The words hit her like a physical blow. "But I thought, we've been together for 8 months. You said—" "What did you think?" His voice rose slightly, eyes narrowing. "That I'd introduce a girl from the South Side to my family? That I'd parade you around at Chicago society events?" Each word pierced deeper than the last. Tasha felt her vision blur with unshed tears. "This was fun," he continued, pushing his chair back and standing. "But it always had an expiration date. Surely you understood that." "No," she whispered. "I didn't understand that at all." Robert sighed, as if dealing with a particularly dense child. "Come on, Tasha. You're smart enough to know how the world works. Someone like me doesn't end up with someone like you." "Someone like me?" The pain in her chest was transforming, hardening into something else. "You know what I mean. Say it," she challenged, rising to her feet. "Say exactly what you mean." His eyes traveled over her dark skin, her curly hair she'd carefully straightened for this meeting, her dress from the clearance rack. "A scholarship case, a girl from Englewood." Tasha stood straighter, dignity replacing shock. "I'm pregnant, Robert, with your child." "That's your problem," he replied, opening his desk drawer and pulling out his wallet. He extracted several bills and tossed them onto the desk. $200. Get it taken care of." Tasha stared at the money, unable to process what was happening. "I don't want your money. I want you to take responsibility." "Responsibility?" Robert's face contorted with disdain. "You really thought you meant something to me? A scholarship girl? Someone I met serving drinks?" The full reality crashed down on Tasha. All those nights, those whispered promises, those moments of supposed intimacy, they had meant nothing to him. She had been a diversion, a temporary amusement. "Please, Robert," she said, her voice breaking. "Let's just talk about this like adults." "We're done talking." He walked around the desk, taking her elbow firmly to guide her toward the door. "This meeting is over." She pulled away from his grasp. "Don't touch me." They walked silently through the elegant corridor, past curious employees, through the marble lobby with its soaring Christmas tree and glittering decorations. Outside, the snow had turned to freezing rain, pelting the sidewalk mercilessly. "Please," Tasha said one last time, standing at the entrance to the building. "Don't do this. We can figure something out." Robert reached into his wallet again, extracted more bills, and tossed them at her feet. They fluttered to the wet pavement, some landing in puddles, the ink beginning to run. "That's all you and any half-breed bastard deserve from me," he hissed, voice low enough that the security guard couldn't hear. "Disappear from my life before I call security." Shocked passers-by watched as Tasha knelt on the wet sidewalk, gathering the sodden bills with trembling fingers. When she looked up, Robert had already turned his back, walking through the revolving doors without a backward glance. The journey home was a blur of tears and disbelief. On the L train, surrounded by holiday shoppers, Tasha sat with her hand pressed against her still flat stomach, trying to comprehend how her life had imploded so completely in a single afternoon. 1 month later, lying on the examination table at a community clinic, Tasha stared at the ultrasound screen in disbelief. "Congratulations," said the technician, pointing to the monitor. "You're having twins." 2 heartbeats, 2 tiny lives growing inside her. The revelation should have been joyful. Instead, it multiplied her terror. How would she possibly manage 2 babies alone? The cascade of losses came quickly after that. Her focus on schoolwork became impossible between morning sickness and emotional distress. Her once stellar grades plummeted. 3 weeks later, the letter arrived from Northwestern. Her scholarship had been revoked due to failure to maintain required academic standards. Without the scholarship, her small studio apartment in Rogers Park became unaffordable. Her landlord's sympathetic expression did nothing to extend the grace period on her rent. "I'm sorry, Ms. Williams," he said, handing her the eviction notice. "I have a waiting list of tenants who can pay." Her mother, fighting stage 4 breast cancer in a hospital across town, could barely speak during their brief phone calls, let alone offer help. "I'm sorry, baby," her mother whispered, voice weak from chemotherapy. "I wish I could do something." "Don't worry, Mom," Tasha replied, forcing brightness into her voice. "I'm figuring things out." With her savings dwindling, Tasha took the only job that would accept a visibly pregnant woman, an emergency dispatcher for the Chicago Police Department. The night shifts were brutal, but the position came with basic health insurance. That alone made it worth the meager $12 per hour. Her new apartment in Englewood, the neighborhood she had fought so hard to escape, was tiny and depressing, with peeling paint and temperamental heating. But it was all she could afford. Night after night, Tasha sat at her dispatcher console, answering desperate calls while silently crying, her expanding belly a constant reminder of Robert's betrayal. Between calls, she would whisper to her unborn daughters. "They'll never know what I went through," she murmured during rare, quiet moments. "They'll never feel the humiliation I felt." Life became a brutal sequence of struggles, sleeping only 4 hours between shifts, selling her textbooks and laptop to buy second-hand cribs, enduring judgmental looks when she walked alone to prenatal appointments, calculating to the penny how much formula would cost, how many diapers she could afford. On a particularly harsh winter night during her dispatch shift, Tasha answered a call that would change her life. A panicked woman tried to explain her location, but the tracking system failed. By the time paramedics arrived at the correct address, it was too late. "If we had a better system, that kid would still be alive," commented a police officer in the hallway afterward. Something awakened in Tasha that night. Between feeding schedules and prenatal appointments, she began sketching diagrams in her old law school notebook. If emergency systems could track calls more accurately, how many lives might be saved? When the twins were born in June 2009, Zoe and Zara, identical except for a small birthmark on Zoe's wrist, Tasha gazed into their green eyes, Robert's eyes, and made a promise. "He threw money at my feet and said we were nothing," she whispered to her daughters as they slept in the hospital nursery. "One day he'll discover what I'm really worth, and you'll be living proof of the biggest mistake of his life." That cold night in her threadbare apartment, as Tasha fell asleep exhausted on her mattress on the floor, she couldn't imagine that 15 years later she would be looking down at Chicago from the 38th floor of a Michigan Avenue skyscraper as CEO of a company valued at $800 million. The final days of Tasha's pregnancy transformed summer heat into an additional burden. Her swollen ankles throbbed as she climbed the stairs to her third-floor apartment, the elevator perpetually out of service. Inside, the single-window air conditioner fought a losing battle against Chicago's July humidity. Tasha eased herself onto the worn sofa, her enormous belly making even the simplest movements a challenge. "Just a little longer," she whispered, rubbing circles over the stretched skin where twins wrestled beneath. Sleep had become nearly impossible. Her back ached constantly, and when she did manage to doze off, dispatch calls echoed in her dreams, phantom phones ringing with emergencies she couldn't solve. At the community health clinic the following day, the nurse practitioner frowned at Tasha's blood pressure reading. "It's running high," she said, making notes in the chart. "Are you getting enough rest?" Tasha's bitter laugh surprised even herself. "I work night shifts at emergency dispatch. Rest isn't exactly on the menu." The nurse's expression softened. "You're carrying twins and working nights? That's too much strain on your body." "Bills don't pay themselves," Tasha replied, her hand instinctively moving to her belly as one of the babies delivered a particularly strong kick. "Any family who can help after they're born?" Tasha shook her head. Her mother's funeral had been 3 weeks earlier, a small service she could barely afford. The cancer had progressed faster than anyone expected, stealing away the one person who might have helped her through this. "You really need to consider taking leave soon," the nurse insisted. "These babies could come early, and with your blood pressure." But Tasha couldn't afford to stop working. Every shift meant money for diapers, formula, and the mounting medical bills. She had already sold everything of value: her laptop, her small jewelry collection, even her winter coat. The second-hand cribs waited in the corner of her bedroom, freshly wiped down but still bearing the scratches and dents of previous owners. 2 nights later, in the fluorescent-lit dispatch center, Tasha's water broke during the midnight shift. Her supervisor called an ambulance while Tasha sat frozen at her console, fear and determination battling for dominance in her mind. "I still have 6 weeks to go," she whispered to the paramedic who helped her onto the stretcher. "Twins often come early," he replied, his voice kind but clinical. "We'll get you to Northwestern Memorial." 36 hours of labor followed, a marathon of pain, fear, and eventually, the most profound exhaustion Tasha had ever experienced. Without family or partner, a kind-faced nurse named Elaine held her hand through the final pushes. "You're doing this," Elaine encouraged as the first baby crowned. "You're so strong, Tasha." At 4:17 in the morning on June 18, 2009, Zoe Williams entered the world with a furious cry, her tiny body slick and red. 3 minutes later, her sister Zara followed, slightly smaller but equally vocal. "They have their father's eyes," Tasha murmured, examining their identical features in the post-delivery haze. Both babies had opened their eyes briefly, startling green irises, exact replicas of Robert's. "They're beautiful," Elaine said, helping position the first twin at Tasha's breast. "Perfect little girls." When the nurses placed both babies in her arms, Tasha was overwhelmed by twin surges of love and terror. They were so small, so dependent, their lives entirely in her hands. How would she possibly manage? "I'll figure it out," she promised them, pressing her lips to each tiny forehead. Somehow. The cramped apartment became even smaller with 2 infant carriers, a changing table rescued from a curb, and the mountain of supplies that twins required. Tasha established a brutal routine, sleeping in 90-minute increments between feedings, washing bottles in assembly line fashion, changing diapers with mechanical efficiency. Her dispatch shifts resumed when the twins were barely 6 weeks old, necessity trumping recovery. The elderly woman in apartment 3C agreed to watch the babies during night shifts in exchange for home-cooked meals that Tasha prepared in batches on her single day off. "They're good babies," Mrs. Hernandez would say, rocking one while the other slept. "Smart, too. They watch everything." Each morning after work, Tasha would collect her daughters, thank Mrs. Hernandez, and trudge upstairs to collapse for a few precious hours while the twins napped. When they woke, she'd feed them, bathe them, and talk to them constantly, describing the world they would someday conquer. "You'll go to college," she told them during midnight feedings. "You'll have opportunities I never had. You'll never depend on someone who can throw you away." Between diaper changes and formula preparations, Tasha couldn't shake the memory of that fateful emergency call. The panicked mother, the system failure, the child lost because help arrived too late. At her dispatch console, she began taking notes on the tracking problems, the communication breakdowns, the technological limitations. During rare, quiet moments, she sketched diagrams in her old law school notebook, initial ideas for a better system, one that could pinpoint locations more accurately, prioritize calls more efficiently, save precious minutes when seconds mattered. "If only we had better software," she muttered one night after a particularly frustrating call where an elderly caller couldn't remember his own address. "You should tell the bosses," her colleague suggested. Tasha laughed bitterly. "Right, because they'll listen to a dispatch operator with no degree." But the ideas wouldn't leave her. While the twins slept, she researched GPS technologies and emergency response systems at the public library, wheeling the double stroller between computer terminals, ignoring the judgmental stares from other patrons. As the twins approached their first birthday, they began showing signs of the extraordinary intelligence that would define them. At 10 months, they babbled in what seemed like their own language, responding to each other's cues. At 11 months, they began stacking blocks in patterns rather than random piles. "They're advanced," the pediatrician noted during their one-year checkup. "Are there other gifted people in your family?" Tasha thought of her own academic achievements before pregnancy derailed them. "I was a law student on scholarship." The doctor nodded. "And their father?" Tasha stiffened. "He's not in the picture." The twins' first birthday was a modest celebration, a small cake Tasha baked herself, balloon animals she twisted after watching a YouTube tutorial, and Mrs. Hernandez as the only guest. As she watched Zoe and Zara smear frosting across their identical faces, Tasha felt a fierce surge of pride mingled with determination. That night, after the twins were asleep, she pulled out her notebook and flipped to the page where she'd been designing a basic call tracking interface. The system in her mind was taking shape, a mobile application that could integrate with existing emergency infrastructure but add crucial functionalities. "I need a computer," she whispered to herself, calculating how many extra shifts it would take to afford even a basic laptop. 3 months later, Tasha found a used laptop at a pawn shop, outdated but functional. She installed it on the kitchen table, surrounded by baby toys and formula canisters. While the twins napped or played in their playpen, she taught herself basic coding through free online tutorials, absorbing information with the same intensity that had earned her a law school scholarship. Her first attempts were frustrating failures: code that wouldn't compile, interfaces that crashed, tracking functions that showed wildly inaccurate results. She cried in frustration more than once, questioning her sanity for thinking she could create something valuable between midnight feedings and exhausting shifts. "Mama sad?" Zoe asked one evening, toddling over to pat Tasha's tear-stained cheek. "Just tired, baby," Tasha replied, gathering her daughter close. "Mama's working on something important." By the twins' second birthday, Tasha had created a rudimentary prototype, clunky and limited, but functional enough to demonstrate her concept. The app could track a caller's location more precisely than the dispatch center's existing system, and included a simple interface for prioritizing emergencies based on multiple factors. When Mrs. Hernandez suffered a minor stroke, Tasha's app helped her direct paramedics to the exact apartment, potentially saving crucial minutes. It was the first real-world test of her creation, and seeing it work filled her with renewed purpose. The twins continued developing at an astonishing pace. By 30 months, they spoke in complex sentences and could count to 20. By 3, they recognized letters and simple words. They watched Tasha work with fascination, sometimes sitting beside her at the kitchen table, scribbling in their own notebooks in imitation. "What you doing, Mama?" Zara would ask, studying the screen with surprising focus for a toddler. "Mama's building something to help people," Tasha would explain, amazed at how the child seemed to absorb the information. One night at the dispatch center, Tasha gathered her courage and approached her supervisor, Alan, during a break. "I've developed something I think could help us," she said, opening her laptop to show him the prototype. "It's a tracking system that's more accurate than what we're using." Alan's expression shifted from mild interest to dismissive amusement as she explained. "This is what you do in your spare time, with twins at home?" "It works," Tasha insisted. "Look, it can pinpoint locations within 3 meters, even without the caller providing an address." "That's cute," Alan replied, barely glancing at the screen. "But we have tech guys for this sort of thing. Professionals with degrees." "Just try it," Tasha pressed. "What's the harm in testing it?" Alan's patronizing smile hardened. "Back to the phones, Williams. Leave the technology to the experts." The dismissal stung, but it didn't deter her. If anything, it fueled her determination. That weekend, while researching technology grants at the library, Tasha discovered a notice for a small technology fair specifically for minority developers. The entry fee was minimal, and participants would have the chance to showcase their projects to potential investors. "We're going to a fair," she told the twins that evening, helping them into their pajamas. "Mama's going to show people her special project." "We help?" Zoe asked, her green eyes, so like Robert's, bright with excitement. "You're my inspiration," Tasha replied, gathering both girls into a hug. "You're the reason I keep trying." The weeks before the fair were a blur of preparation. Tasha refined her prototype, created a simple presentation, and practiced her pitch while cooking, bathing the twins, even while riding the bus to work. Mrs. Hernandez agreed to watch the girls during the fair, understanding how important this opportunity was. The morning of the fair, Tasha dressed in her most professional outfit, a navy blue skirt suit purchased from a thrift store and carefully tailored to fit her slender frame. She knelt before her daughters, straightening their matching dresses. "Wish Mama luck," she said, kissing each small forehead. "You the best, Mama," Zara replied with absolute conviction. "The very best," Zoe echoed. As she practiced her presentation one last time in the bathroom mirror, Tasha studied her reflection. The dark circles under her eyes, the tension lines around her mouth, the determination that had replaced the naive hope once visible there. "He threw money at my feet," she whispered to her reflection. "Said we weren't worth anything. Today, I start proving him wrong." The small bolsa of $5,000 seemed like a fortune that night, as Tasha hadn't yet realized that in 7 years her application would be worth more than $100 million, and that Malcolm would become much more than a mentor in her life. The $5,000 grant clutched in Tasha's hands represented more than money. It was validation, a first acknowledgement that her ideas had merit. As she stepped into her apartment that evening, the twins rushed to greet her, their identical faces beaming with excitement. "Did you win, Mama?" Zoe asked, tugging at Tasha's skirt. Tasha knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with her 3-year-old daughters. "I got something even better than winning. I got someone who believes in us." 3 years had passed since that life-changing moment at the technology fair. Tasha's life had settled into a relentless rhythm of work, coding, and motherhood. The emergency dispatch center still paid her bills, but every spare moment was devoted to refining her tracking application, which she'd named Horizon, during a rare moment of optimism, looking toward a better future. The twins had grown from helpless infants into bright, curious preschoolers. At 3, both girls could already count to 100, recognized dozens of sight words, and showed an uncanny ability to understand patterns that left even Tasha amazed. One morning in early spring, Tasha sat at their small kitchen table, helping the twins practice writing their names. Zara's tongue poked out in concentration as she carefully formed each letter. Zoe, always slightly more impatient, had already finished and was counting the Cheerios in her bowl. 27, 28, 29, Zoe murmured, arranging the cereal in neat rows. "Very good, sweetheart," Tasha said, glancing at the clock. "Finish up, girls. Ms. Rodriguez is expecting you in 5 minutes." The elderly neighbor had become their de facto grandmother, watching the twins during Tasha's shifts and nurturing their growing minds with Spanish lessons and endless patience. Tasha couldn't have afforded even basic daycare without her. "Will you work on your computer today, Mama?" Zara asked, carefully folding her paper with her name written 10 times. "After my nap, I have a big meeting tomorrow that I need to prepare for." The big meeting made Tasha's stomach clench with anxiety. After months of applications and follow-up emails, she'd finally secured an appointment with her dispatch center supervisor and the operations director to present her improved tracking system. This wasn't just about getting recognition, it was about potentially changing her family's trajectory. That evening, after putting the twins to bed with stories and kisses, Tasha rehearsed her presentation in front of the bathroom mirror. The woman who stared back at her looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair hastily pulled back, wearing a blouse she'd ironed 3 times to hide its wear. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. "You've created something valuable." Sleep came fitfully that night, her dreams filled with failing technology and dismissive laughter. When morning arrived, Tasha dressed in her only professional outfit, the same navy suit from the technology fair, now showing signs of age despite her careful maintenance. At the dispatch center's administrative offices, Tasha waited nervously, her laptop and notes arranged precisely on her lap. When finally ushered into the conference room, she faced 3 men in suits, their expressions ranging from bored to skeptical. "Ms. Williams," began Director Hargrove, "I understand you've developed some sort of tracking system." You have 15 minutes. Tasha rose, pushed aside her nervousness, and launched into the presentation she'd practiced hundreds of times. Our current system fails to locate approximately 18% of emergency callers accurately. My application reduces that to under 3%. She demonstrated the interface, explained the algorithm, showed test results from dozens of simulated scenarios. For a moment, she thought she saw interest flicker in the operations director's eyes. The technology uses existing infrastructure but optimizes response routing based on multiple factors simultaneously, she continued, gaining confidence. This system could reduce response time by up to 40% in dense urban areas. When she finished, silence filled the room. Director Hargrove leaned back, exchanging glances with his colleagues. "It's an interesting hobby project, Ms. Williams," he said finally, his tone patronizing. "But we contract with established technology firms for our systems. Companies with teams of engineers, proper testing protocols, liability insurance." "But the test results," Tasha began. "Back to the phones, Williams," interrupted her direct supervisor, not even attempting to hide his dismissive smirk. "Leave the technology to the experts. We appreciate your enthusiasm, but this isn't a science fair project." The humiliation burned through her as she gathered her materials. "Thank you for your time," she managed, maintaining dignity despite the rejection. That evening, as the twins played with wooden blocks on the apartment floor, Tasha fought back tears of frustration. She'd been so certain they would see the value in her work. "You build a tall tower," she praised Zoe, who was stacking blocks in a surprisingly stable structure. "It won't fall down," Zoe declared proudly. "I made the bottom strong." Something about her daughter's simple confidence reignited Tasha's determination. If her current approach wasn't working, she needed a new foundation, a different venue where her ideas might be valued. The following week, while researching local technology events at the public library, Tasha discovered a flyer for Chicago's Minority Tech Showcase, an event specifically for underrepresented developers to display their innovations. The entrance fee was steep, $200, almost half her weekly paycheck. But the opportunity to put her application before actual technology professionals, not just bureaucrats, seemed worth the risk. After enrolling in the showcase, Tasha threw herself into preparations. Every night after the twins fell asleep, she refined her application, improved the interface, and rehearsed explanations of complex technological concepts in simple, compelling terms. "What you doing, Mama?" Zara asked one evening, appearing beside Tasha's makeshift desk in her pajamas. "I'm practicing explaining my special computer program," Tasha replied, surprised to find her daughter awake. "Why aren't you sleeping, baby?" "I want to help," Zara said simply, climbing onto Tasha's lap. Tasha smiled, struck by a sudden inspiration. "Actually, you can help. Let me tell you about my program, and you tell me if you understand, okay?" For the next 10 minutes, Tasha explained her application in the simplest terms possible while Zara listened with surprising focus. The exercise forced Tasha to distill her pitch to its essence, a valuable lesson for the upcoming showcase. The day of the showcase arrived with stomach-churning nervousness. Tasha had arranged for Ms. Rodriguez to watch the twins for the entire day, promising to bring back a special dinner as payment. "Be brave, Mama," Zoe said seriously as Tasha knelt to kiss them goodbye. "Like the princess in the story," Zara added. "I'll try to be as brave as both of you," Tasha promised, her heart swelling with love for these remarkable little girls. The convention center bustled with activity, booths displaying innovations from medical devices to educational software. Tasha's modest table, positioned near the back, featured only her laptop, a simple poster explaining Horizon's capabilities, and business cards printed at the library on cardstock. As attendees began filtering through the exhibits, Tasha's confidence wavered. All around her, developers with sleek equipment and polished presentations commanded attention. Her second-hand laptop and hand-designed poster looked amateurish by comparison. For the first hour, barely anyone stopped at her table. Those who paused long enough to hear her pitch offered vague encouragement before moving on to more impressive displays. By midday, Tasha fought to maintain her professional smile as disappointment settled like a weight on her shoulders. "This looks interesting," said a deep voice, startling her from her thoughts. Tasha looked up to see a well-dressed black man in his mid-40s studying her poster with genuine interest. His tailored suit and confident bearing marked him as someone of significance. "Thank you," she replied, straightening. "Would you like a demonstration?" "Please." He nodded, introducing himself. "Malcolm Carter. I invest in early-stage tech with social impact potential." Tasha launched into her presentation, explaining how Horizon could dramatically improve emergency response times, potentially saving thousands of lives annually. To her surprise, Malcolm asked insightful questions, pushing her to elaborate on technical aspects other visitors had glossed over. "You've addressed a critical blind spot in current systems," he observed after 20 minutes of conversation. "What's your background in emergency services?" "I'm a dispatch operator," Tasha admitted. 3 years now. Before that, I was in law school until—" She hesitated, unwilling to share her personal history with a stranger. "Until life happened," Malcolm supplied tactfully. "And you developed this between dispatch shifts?" Tasha nodded. "And while raising twin 3-year-olds?" Malcolm's eyebrows rose. "Impressive multitasking. Have you approached emergency services departments with this?" "I presented to my supervisors yesterday," Tasha said, unable to keep disappointment from her voice. "They suggested I stick to answering phones and leave technology to experts." Malcolm shook his head, a flash of recognition crossing his features. "You've thought of something they missed, and that threatens them. That's not failure. That's often the first sign of genius." For the next hour, Malcolm peppered her with questions about scaling, implementation costs, and potential modifications. As the showcase wound down, he handed Tasha his business card, heavy cardstock with embossed lettering. "I'd like to help you develop this further," he said. "My foundation provides small grants to promising minority innovators, $5,000 to start, with mentorship and networking support." Tasha stared at him, certain she'd misheard. $5,000? For my application? "For your vision," Malcolm corrected. "This isn't charity, Ms. Williams. It's an investment in something I believe has tremendous potential." That evening, Tasha splurged on pizza delivery, a rare treat to celebrate with the twins and Ms. Rodriguez. As the girls chattered excitedly about their day, Malcolm arrived with paperwork and the promised check. "These must be the famous twins," he said warmly, accepting the slice of pizza Tasha offered. "This is Zoe and this is Zara," Tasha introduced them, pointing to the small birthmark on Zoe's wrist that distinguished the identical girls. Malcolm knelt to their level. "Your mom has created something very special. Did you know that?" Both girls nodded solemnly. "Mama's computer helps people not get lost," Zoe explained. "And the ambulance finds them faster," Zara added. Malcolm glanced up at Tasha, impressed. "They understand the concept already?" "They understand more than most adults," Tasha replied, pride evident in her voice. "They're exceptional." As they reviewed the grant paperwork at the kitchen table, Tasha noticed Malcolm studying the twins, who were now drawing elaborate patterns with crayons. "They have something special in their eyes," he observed quietly. "A rare intelligence. You can see it in how they focus." Tasha felt the familiar mixture of pride and protective fear that accompanied any recognition of her daughter's gifts. "They're everything to me." After Malcolm left, Tasha tucked the check carefully into her wallet. With this grant, she could purchase better equipment, maybe take online courses in advanced programming, and still have enough to create a small emergency fund for the girls. That night, as she worked on her improved laptop, the first purchase made with Malcolm's grant, Tasha felt a fragile hope blooming. Perhaps this was the beginning of something meaningful, not just for her, but for her daughters. The small grant of $5,000 seemed like a fortune that night, as Tasha hadn't yet realized that in 7 years her application would be worth more than $100 million, and that Malcolm would become much more than a mentor in her life. 2 years passed in a blur of code, persistence, and small victories. The $5,000 from Malcolm's grant stretched further than Tasha could have imagined, fueling her transformation from amateur programmer to legitimate developer. Her apartment's kitchen table had become a workshop of innovation, scattered with notebooks filled with algorithms and user interface sketches. On a crisp autumn morning, Tasha stood in the operations center of Chicago's 12th precinct, her heart pounding as officers and dispatch personnel gathered around a demonstration of her Horizon tracking system. This moment represented months of networking, persistence, and Malcolm's unwavering support. He had leveraged his connections to secure this pilot test opportunity. The standard tracking system has a margin of error of approximately 50 meters in dense urban areas, Tasha explained, her voice steady despite her nerves. Horizon narrows that to under 5 meters, even without the caller providing a specific address. Captain Jenkins, a veteran officer with salt-and-pepper hair and permanent skepticism etched into his features, crossed his arms. Impressive claims. Let's see if it delivers. The test was simple but high stakes. 10 emergency calls would be routed through both the standard system and Horizon simultaneously. Response times and location accuracy would be compared. 3 hours later, the results were undeniable. Horizon had reduced location identification time by 32% across all test calls, with accuracy improvements that left even the most skeptical dispatchers impressed. "How did you address the signal interference issues in high-rise buildings?" asked a technical officer, leaning forward with genuine interest. Tasha launched into an explanation of her triangulation algorithm, watching understanding and respect dawn in the eyes of the professionals around her. For the first time, she wasn't being dismissed as a dispatch operator with delusions of grandeur. She was being recognized as an innovator. Captain Jenkins approached her after the demonstration. His initial skepticism softened. "You've created something valuable here, Williams. We'll run a 90-day trial in this precinct. If the results hold up, I'll recommend it to the department." As Tasha packed up her equipment, Malcolm squeezed her shoulder gently. "That's what breakthrough looks like," he said, smiling. "The moment professionals realize you've solved a problem they couldn't." Back in her apartment that evening, Tasha watched the twins build an elaborate structure from wooden blocks. At 5, they demonstrated focus and spatial reasoning that continually astonished her. Their private preschool, funded by a scholarship Malcolm had helped secure, had already identified them as potentially gifted. "Mama, look!" Zoe called, pointing to their creation. "It's your computer program!" Tasha looked closer and gasped softly. The girls had constructed a 3-dimensional model of Chicago's grid system, with small toy cars positioned as emergency vehicles, complete with paths marked by string showing the most efficient routes to different locations. "You understand Mama's work?" she asked, kneeling beside them. Zara nodded seriously. "It's about finding the fastest way to help people. The straightest line isn't always fastest," Zoe added, demonstrating by moving a small ambulance around a block rather than through a congested area they'd marked with red blocks. Malcolm arrived an hour later with Chinese takeout and important news. The twins greeted him with enthusiasm, having grown fond of his regular visits over the past 2 years. He'd become a fixture in their lives, bringing books that challenged their advanced minds, listening to their observations with genuine interest, and treating Tasha with a respect she'd almost forgotten she deserved. "The results from today's demonstration are already creating buzz," he said after dinner, while the twins were engrossed in a documentary about ocean life. "But we need to talk about protection." "Protection?" Tasha asked, clearing away the takeout containers. "Intellectual property protection," Malcolm clarified. "You need to formalize this, Tasha. Create a company. Patent your algorithms, trademark the name, before someone sees what you've built and takes it." The conversation continued late into the evening, Malcolm patiently explaining the complexities of business formation, intellectual property law, and the strategic advantages of establishing Horizon as a legitimate enterprise rather than a personal project. "I don't know the first thing about running a company," Tasha admitted, overwhelmed by the information. "You didn't know the first thing about emergency tracking systems or programming either," Malcolm pointed out. "Yet here we are." 2 weeks later, they sat in a small law office in downtown Chicago, signing the incorporation documents for Horizon Communications. Tasha Williams was listed as CEO and majority shareholder, with Malcolm Carter as CFO and minority investor. The moment felt surreal, from dispatch operator to company founder in 2 years. "It's just paperwork for now," Malcolm reminded her. "The real work is proving the concept beyond a single precinct test." The real work required space. Tasha's apartment couldn't accommodate the expansion they needed. After considering various options, they leased a basement space in a commercial building in Rogers Park. Affordable, if somewhat dreary, with enough room for workstations and a small play area for the twins. Setting up their makeshift headquarters became a family project. The twins helped arrange desks purchased from a liquidation sale, Malcolm installed secure internet connections, and Tasha created a workspace that included a corner with child-sized furniture where Zoe and Zara could read or draw while she worked. "It's not exactly Silicon Valley," Tasha remarked on opening day, looking around at the modest space with its concrete floors and exposed pipes. "Every empire starts somewhere," Malcolm replied, plugging in a coffee maker that looked older than the twins. "Apple began in a garage." The 90-day trial at the 12th precinct yielded results that exceeded even Tasha's optimistic projections. Emergency response times decreased by 32%, location accuracy improved by 46%, and dispatcher satisfaction ratings increased dramatically. Captain Jenkins became their first advocate within the Chicago Emergency Services system. Yet despite these successes, Tasha maintained her dispatch job, working night shifts while building Horizon during the day. The stability of a regular paycheck, meager as it was, provided security that her fledgling company couldn't yet guarantee. One evening, as Tasha reviewed the day's test data at their basement office, Malcolm arrived with dinner for the three of them. The twins had fallen asleep on the small futon in their corner, surrounded by advanced mathematics workbooks their kindergarten teacher had provided to keep them challenged. "You look exhausted," Malcolm observed, setting down containers of pasta. "Just the usual, 4 hours of sleep between worlds," Tasha replied, rubbing her eyes. They ate in comfortable silence, occasionally discussing minor adjustments to the tracking algorithm. When they finished, Malcolm helped clear away the containers, his hand briefly touching hers as they reached for the same napkin. The moment hung between them, electric and unexpected. Tasha looked up, meeting his eyes, seeing something there she hadn't allowed herself to notice before. "Tasha," he began softly. "Malcolm, she started simultaneously. They both laughed, breaking the tension. Malcolm gently took her hand. "I've wanted to do this for months," he said, then leaned forward and kissed her, tentatively at first, then with more certainty when she responded. When they separated, Tasha felt dizzy with surprise and something else, a feeling she'd buried so deeply she barely recognized it. Hope, not just professional hope, but personal hope, the possibility that she might be worthy of genuine affection, respect, and partnership. "I didn't plan for this," she whispered. "I never expected—" "Neither did I," Malcolm admitted. "But some things you don't plan for, they just become inevitable." In the months that followed, their relationship deepened alongside their professional partnership. Malcolm became a regular presence in the twins' lives, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories, and treating their extraordinary intellects with the respect and nurturing they deserved. The breakthrough came 6 months after the incorporation of Horizon. Through Malcolm's connections, they secured a meeting with officials from Milwaukee's Emergency Services Department, a city large enough to provide meaningful validation, but small enough to take a chance on an unproven startup. Tasha and Malcolm prepared meticulously for the presentation. The night before, they rehearsed in the basement office until the twins fell asleep amid their coloring books. "You've got this," Malcolm assured her. "You know this system better than anyone alive." The Milwaukee presentation went beyond their expectations. The emergency services director, impressed by both the technology and Tasha's intimate knowledge of dispatch operations, asked pointed questions about implementation costs and timeframes. "We've had vendors promise us the moon before," he said toward the end of the meeting. "What makes Horizon different?" "Because I've sat where your dispatchers sit," Tasha replied without hesitation. "I've taken the calls that couldn't be traced in time. I've heard the last words of people we couldn't reach fast enough. This isn't theoretical for me. It's personal." 2 weeks later, the contract arrived. $45,000 for a 1-year implementation of Horizon in Milwaukee's emergency dispatch center. It wasn't a fortune, but it represented legitimacy, their first official client. Tasha stared at the contract, tears welling in her eyes. "It's real," she whispered. "It's actually happening." That evening, she submitted her resignation to the Chicago Dispatch Center, ending 5 years of grueling night shifts, dismissive supervisors, and being treated as nothing more than a voice on the end of a line. "I'm building something better," she told her supervisor, who looked genuinely surprised to be losing her. They celebrated that night with cheap champagne in plastic cups, the twins drinking apple juice in matching cups, giggling at the bubbles. Malcolm toasted Tasha's vision, persistence, and courage. The girls toasted Mama's computer that helps people. Their first hire came a week later. A young programmer named Eric, who had recently graduated from Northwestern and believed in Horizon's mission enough to accept a salary barely above minimum wage. Tasha recognized in him the hunger to prove himself, to build something meaningful. As summer turned to fall, Tasha and Malcolm sat on the small balcony of her apartment after the twins had gone to bed, discussing next steps. "If Milwaukee works," Malcolm said, sipping a glass of wine, "we can approach Chicago again. But this time, we'll be coming with proven results, not just promises." Tasha nodded, looking out at the city lights. "I want to come back here and succeed where they dismissed me." That night, for the first time in years, Tasha slept peacefully, without the anxiety that had been her constant companion since that snowy day when Robert had tossed money at her feet. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building, creating, moving forward with purpose. As she drifted off to sleep, Tasha wasn't aware that the small celebration with plastic cups and cheap champagne was just a preview. She couldn't have imagined that one day she would be invited to the White House to discuss how her technology could transform national security. Tasha adjusted the collar of her ivory silk blouse, a recent splurge that would have been unimaginable 3 years ago, and took a deep breath. Through the garden archway, she could see Malcolm waiting beside a simple white trellis, the twins standing beside him in matching lavender dresses, their dark curls adorned with small white flowers. No elaborate wedding had been necessary. This intimate gathering of close friends in Malcolm's backyard felt perfect. "Ready?" asked Elaine, the nurse who had held Tasha's hand during the twins' birth and had since become a dear friend. "More than ready," Tasha replied, her voice steady with certainty. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. Malcolm's eyes never left hers as they exchanged vows, promising partnership, respect, and love. When he placed the simple gold band on her finger, Tasha thought of how far she had come from that rain-soaked sidewalk where Robert had tossed money at her feet. The twins beamed throughout the ceremony, occasionally whispering to each other in the secret language they still maintained between themselves. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," said the officiant, Malcolm's longtime friend and attorney. As applause erupted from their small gathering of friends, Zoe and Zara rushed forward, wrapping their arms around both adults. "Are we a real family now?" Zara asked, looking up at Malcolm with those striking green eyes. Malcolm knelt down, meeting their gaze. "We've been a real family for a long time already," he assured them. "This just makes it official." 3 months after the wedding, Horizon Communications moved into its first real office space, an entire floor in a mid-rise commercial building in downtown Chicago. Gone were the basement pipes and second-hand furniture, replaced by modern workstations, conference rooms, and a dedicated area for the twins when they visited after school. 28 employees now worked under Tasha's leadership, from developers to implementation specialists who trained emergency services personnel. "Team meeting in 5 minutes," announced Tasha's assistant, poking her head into the glass-walled office where Tasha was reviewing the latest performance metrics from Milwaukee. The conference room filled quickly with Horizon staff, a diverse group that reflected Tasha's commitment to hiring talent from underrepresented backgrounds. At 30, she had become not just a CEO but a mentor to many young professionals who saw in her a path forward. "The results from the 6-month implementation in Kenosha are exceptional," Tasha began, standing confidently at the head of the table. "Response times down 43%, location accuracy improved by 61% compared to their previous system." She clicked through slides showing performance graphs and testimonials from emergency services directors. The confidence in her voice, the precision of her analysis, the strategic vision she outlined, none of this resembled the hesitant dispatch operator who had once struggled to be heard. "Next week we present our bid for the Wisconsin state contract," she continued. "This would mean implementing Horizon across all emergency services in the state: police, fire, ambulance, everything." "Against serious competition," added Malcolm, now officially the company's CFO. "Telcor and NRS have both submitted bids. They're established players with decades in the industry." "And outdated technology," Tasha countered. "Their systems were designed for landlines and adapted for mobile. Ours was built for the mobile era from the ground up." After the meeting dispersed, Tasha returned to her office to find Zoe and Zara sitting at her conference table, intently focused on the whiteboard where complex equations covered the surface. At 8 years old, the twins had surpassed all expectations of their already advanced academic trajectory. Their new private school for gifted children struggled to keep them challenged. "Mom, we found a problem with the triangulation algorithm," Zoe announced without looking up from her calculations. Tasha paused, setting down her tablet. "What kind of problem?" "It doesn't account for signal bouncing off metal structures correctly," Zara explained, making a slight adjustment to an equation. "In dense areas with lots of metal and glass, you'd get a 3 to 5% error increase." Tasha approached the board, studying their work with growing astonishment. The mathematics they were using was college level at minimum, possibly beyond. Yet they had identified a genuine limitation in the system that her adult engineers hadn't noticed. "Eric," she called through the open door, "can you come look at this?" The lead engineer entered, coffee in hand, and stopped short at the sight of the twins' work. "Did you do this?" he asked Tasha. "They did," she replied, gesturing to her daughters. Eric studied the equations, his expression shifting from skepticism to genuine shock. "They're right," he finally said. "This could make a significant difference in urban canyons." Within days, the engineering team had incorporated the twins' adjustment into the core algorithm, dubbing it the Twin Enhancement. The improvement pushed Horizon's accuracy even further beyond its competitors, a fact that would prove crucial in the upcoming state contract bid. The evening before the Wisconsin presentation, Tasha practiced her pitch in the living room of their new home, a modest but comfortable 4-bedroom in a safe neighborhood with excellent schools. Malcolm sat on the couch offering feedback, while the twins occasionally interjected with suggestions that were startlingly insightful. "When you explain the cost savings, show the 5-year projection, not just the 3-year, Zoe suggested. "The lines cross more dramatically there." "And mention how the system can scale without hardware upgrades," added Zara. "The other companies require new equipment every 2 years." Tasha exchanged an amazed glance with Malcolm. "How do you know that?" "We read the competitor spec sheets on your tablet," they answered in unison, as if this were perfectly normal behavior for 8-year-olds. The Wisconsin State Emergency Services Commission meeting room was intimidating. a formal chamber with high ceilings, wood paneling, and portraits of former governors watching from the walls. Representatives from Telcor and NRS sat confidently at the presentation table, their teams twice the size of Horizon's three-person delegation. When Tasha's turn came, she approached the podium with the quiet confidence of someone who thoroughly understood both the problem and its solution. For 40 minutes, she walked the commission through Horizon's capabilities, cost advantages, and proven results from existing implementations. "The system Ms. Williams describes sounds impressive," interrupted a commissioner during the question period. "But Horizon is a small company with limited resources. Telcor has been providing emergency services technology for 23 years. Why should we take a risk on an unproven entity?" Tasha met his gaze steadily. "With respect, Commissioner, our results prove we're not unproven. But more importantly, Telcor designed their system for a world that no longer exists. Landlines, fixed addresses, simple triangulation. We built Horizon for today's reality, mobile devices, people in motion, complex urban environments." She paused, then continued with quiet intensity. "And as for being small, we're nimble. When Milwaukee needed custom modifications for their lakefront areas, we delivered in 2 weeks. Ask Telcor how long their last custom request took." The room fell silent. The commissioner nodded slowly, making a note. 2 weeks later, the news arrived via formal letter. Horizon Communications had been awarded the Wisconsin state contract, $1.2 million for initial implementation, with annual maintenance fees to follow. It was their largest contract by far, a validation that transformed Horizon from a promising startup to a legitimate contender in the emergency services technology sector. The celebration that night was considerably more upscale than plastic cups and cheap champagne. The entire Horizon team gathered at an upscale restaurant, toasting their success with genuine camaraderie. Malcolm raised his glass to Tasha. "To the visionary who saw what everyone else missed," he said proudly. Later that week, a technology trade publication ran its first story about Horizon, the startup revolutionizing emergency communications. The article detailed the company's innovative approach and rapid growth, featuring a photograph of Tasha standing confidently in the Horizon Operations Center. With the company's success came personal milestones as well. That spring, Tasha and Malcolm purchased their first house, a comfortable 4-bedroom in a neighborhood known for excellent schools and safe streets. After years in cramped apartments, the space felt almost decadent. "You girls can each have your own room," Tasha told the twins as they explored the house on moving day. "Or share if you prefer." "Share," they answered instantly, having never considered separation. As Horizon expanded, the twins enrolled in their new school for gifted children, adjusting to being around other students for the first time. The transition proved challenging. Their intellectual abilities far outpaced even their gifted peers, creating social barriers that concerned Tasha. They tested at high school mathematics level, the principal informed Tasha and Malcolm during a conference, and their language skills are equally advanced. "We're struggling to place them appropriately." "Are they happy?" Tasha asked, more concerned with their emotional well-being than their academic advancement. "They seem content," the principal replied carefully, "but somewhat isolated. Their thought processes are different from other children their age." That evening, Tasha found the twins reading advanced physics textbooks in their shared bedroom. "Making any friends at school?" she asked casually, sitting on the edge of their bed. Zoe shrugged. "The other kids think we're weird." "They play baby games," Zara added, "and they don't understand our ideas." Tasha felt a familiar pang, the isolation of being different, of thinking beyond your circumstances. She had experienced it herself, though in different ways. "Sometimes being special means being a little lonely," she acknowledged, "but you always have each other, and you have us." As Horizon's reputation grew, Tasha received her first invitation to speak at a public safety conference in Denver. The prospect terrified her, standing before hundreds of industry professionals, presenting herself as an expert. "What if they realize I'm just a girl from the South Side?" she confessed to Malcolm the night before her flight. "What if they see through me?" Malcolm took her hands. "See through to what? The brilliant woman who revolutionized emergency response technology? The CEO who built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing? The mother raising two extraordinary daughters while running a growing business?" The conference proved transformative. Tasha's presentation on next-generation emergency response systems drew the largest audience of the event. Afterward, a line of industry professionals waited to exchange cards, ask questions, and propose potential partnerships. Among them was a representative from a large technology conglomerate who pulled Tasha aside with a tempting offer. "We'd like to discuss acquisition," he said smoothly. $15 million plus retention packages for key personnel. The number was staggering, enough to secure her family's future forever, to give the twins every opportunity imaginable. Tasha promised to consider it, though she already knew her answer. "They want to buy us," she told Malcolm that night on the phone, "absorb our technology into their suite and gradually phase out the Horizon brand." "It's a lot of money," Malcolm acknowledged, "life-changing money." "It's not about the money," Tasha replied. "It's about what we're building, about proving that someone like me can create something lasting." The offer was formally declined the following week. Horizon would remain independent, growing on its own terms. That summer, as the company expanded to 30 employees and the twins completed advanced mathematics coursework typically reserved for high school seniors, Zoe asked the question Tasha had been dreading. "Mom," she began during dinner, her expression serious, "why doesn't our biological father want to know us?" The question hung in the air. Malcolm looked at Tasha, his expression supportive but neutral. This was her story to tell. "It's complicated," Tasha began carefully. "He wasn't ready to be a father when I told him about you." "Did he ever try to find us?" Zara asked. "Does he know we exist?" "He knows," Tasha confirmed, "but he made a choice a long time ago." "Is he a bad person?" Zoe pressed. Tasha considered her answer carefully. "He made a bad choice. People are more complicated than just good or bad." That night, after the twins were asleep, Tasha sorted through the business cards she'd collected at the conference. Potential clients, partners, investors, all eager to be associated with Horizon. She couldn't help but reflect on the irony. While Tasha carefully filed away the business cards from interested technology partners, she didn't know that in just 4 years, Horizon would become one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the United States, with a valuation that would make the Thompson fortune look modest in comparison. While Tasha carefully filed away the business cards from interested technology partners, she couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in just 2 years. Horizon Communications had exploded beyond her wildest expectations, transforming from a basement startup to an industry disruptor with 120 employees and contracts across 12 states. The view from her corner office on the 20th floor of their downtown Chicago headquarters offered a panoramic vista of the city that had once seemed determined to defeat her. Below, Lake Michigan stretched like a blue canvas against the urban landscape, a daily reminder of how far she had come from that rain-soaked sidewalk where Robert had humiliated her. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Her executive assistant entered with a stack of magazines. "These just arrived, Ms. Williams. Thought you'd want to see them right away." Tasha accepted the publications, her breath catching as she saw her own image on the cover of Tech Innovators magazine. The headline read, "The Visionary Saving Lives with Technology: How Tasha Williams Revolutionized Emergency Response." "Thank you, Andrea," she said, trying to mask her emotion. 7 years ago, she had been a pregnant dispatch operator struggling to pay rent. Now, at 33, she was being celebrated as a pioneer in technology. The intercom buzzed. "The engineering team is ready for the algorithm presentation." In the conference room, the twins sat side by side at the head of the table, their 10-year-old frames dwarfed by the executive chairs. Around them, Horizon's senior engineers, all adults with advanced degrees, waited attentively, notepads ready. "We identified a significant inefficiency in the current response routing system," Zoe began, her voice confident despite her youth. Zara continued seamlessly, as if they shared one mind. "By implementing a dynamic rerouting protocol that accounts for real-time traffic pattern changes, we can improve response times by an additional 28% in congested urban areas." For the next 30 minutes, the twins presented their algorithm enhancement with the precision and depth of seasoned professors. The engineers took furious notes, occasionally exchanging glances of disbelief at the sophistication coming from children who had only recently entered double digits in age. "We're calling it the twin algorithm," Zoe concluded with a small smile. Eric, now Horizon's chief technology officer, leaned forward. "This is remarkable. Implementing this would put us years ahead of any competitor in the market." "How soon can we integrate it into the current system?" Tasha asked, pride evident in her voice. "With proper testing, 3 weeks," Eric replied. "Assuming it performs as projected, this could be the centerpiece of our next major release." Later that afternoon, Tasha watched through the glass wall of her office as the engineering team implemented the first phase of the twins' algorithm. The girls moved among the adults with surprising authority, pointing out code sections that needed modification, explaining complex mathematical concepts with patience beyond their years. Malcolm entered, placing a gentle kiss on Tasha's cheek. "Still amazes me every time I see it," he said, following her gaze. "Sometimes I can't believe they came from me," Tasha admitted. "Their minds work in ways I can barely comprehend." "They got your determination," Malcolm replied, "and your heart." The moment was interrupted by Andrea. "Ms. Williams, the venture capital representatives are here." Tasha straightened her designer blazer, a far cry from the discount store clothes she once wore. "Show them to the main conference room." The meeting with Pinnacle Ventures was tense from the start. 3 men in expensive suits presented charts projecting Horizon's growth potential while outlining their proposition: $50 million for 30% ownership stake. "Your company is at an inflection point," explained the lead investor, a silver-haired man with calculating eyes. "With our capital injection, you could expand internationally within 18 months." Tasha listened politely, occasionally glancing at Malcolm, who sat beside her reviewing the proposed term sheet with a critical eye. "And naturally, we'd want 2 board seats and approval rights for major strategic decisions," the investor continued, standard for an investment of this magnitude. When he finished, Tasha closed the presentation folder deliberately before responding. "Gentlemen, I appreciate your interest in Horizon, but this company remains under family control. That's non-negotiable." "Ms. Williams," the investor leaned forward, his tone shifting to one he might use with a naive child. "In this industry, growth requires capital. Without significant investment, you'll eventually hit a ceiling." "Then we'll build a taller building," Tasha replied without hesitation. "This company stays in the Williams-Carter family." After the investors departed, visibly displeased, Malcolm gave Tasha a questioning look. $50 million is a lot to walk away from. "It's not about the money," she replied. "It's about control. I didn't build this from nothing just to have decisions dictated by men in boardrooms." The following week brought a new challenge. Reports began circulating among potential clients that Horizon's systems contained security vulnerabilities, allegations that threatened to undermine pending contracts. An emergency leadership meeting confirmed their fears. "It's targeted sabotage," explained their head of security. These rumors started appearing simultaneously across multiple industry forums. "Someone's trying to damage our reputation." "Telcor," Malcolm suggested. "They've lost 3 major contracts to us this quarter alone." Tasha's expression hardened. "Gather evidence, document everything. If they're spreading false information, we'll respond legally." That evening, their home atmosphere was tense as Tasha and Malcolm disagreed over how to address the crisis. The twins, always perceptive, interrupted their heated discussion in the kitchen. "Are you fighting because of us?" Zara asked, her green eyes, so like Robert's, wide with concern. "Of course not, sweetheart," Tasha assured her, immediately softening her tone. "We're just discussing a problem at work." "The security allegations," Zoe stated matter-of-factly. "We heard. It's a competitive smear campaign based on theoretical vulnerabilities that don't exist in our actual implementation." Malcolm and Tasha exchanged surprised glances. Sometimes they forgot how much the twins absorbed. Later that night, after the girls had gone to bed, Tasha was scrolling through industry news on her tablet when a headline caught her eye. "Former real estate executive Thompson named to command position in Chicago Police Department." Her finger froze above the screen. The article featured a photograph of Robert Thompson in police uniform, looking distinguished and authoritative as he accepted his new role as a commanding officer. According to the piece, he had left his family's real estate business 3 years earlier to pursue a career in public service, rapidly ascending through police ranks through a combination of family connections and natural leadership. Tasha couldn't look away from his image. Older now, more distinguished, but with the same confident smile that had once charmed her. A strange mixture of emotions churned inside her: anger, vindication, and something else she couldn't quite identify. Night after night, she found herself searching for more information about Robert's new career. She created a secure folder on her computer where she stored articles, photographs, and public records about him, a digital dossier of the man who had abandoned her and their daughters. One evening, working late at the office, Tasha didn't hear Malcolm enter. When she looked up, he was standing in the doorway, eyes fixed on her screen where Robert's official police department photograph was displayed. "You're still trapped in his orbit," Malcolm said quietly. "After all this time." Tasha closed the laptop quickly. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" His voice held no accusation, only sadness. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you're still giving him power over you." "I'm just keeping tabs on him," Tasha explained weakly. "It's prudent to know where he is, what he's doing." "Is it prudent, or is it punishment?" Malcolm asked. "Not for him. He doesn't even know you're watching. For yourself." The conversation marked the first significant crack in their marriage, a hairline fracture that would widen in the months ahead as Tasha's silent obsession with Robert continued alongside Horizon's exponential growth. Meanwhile, the twins continued their extraordinary academic journey. Harvard University's special program for exceptionally gifted youth reached out with an unprecedented offer. They wanted Zoe and Zara to participate in advanced computer science research despite their young age. "This is an extraordinary opportunity," explained the program director during a video call. "We've never admitted students so young, but their algorithm work is genuinely groundbreaking." That evening, Tasha sat with her daughters on their bedroom floor, surrounded by their books and scientific journals, a stark contrast to the children's toys one might expect. "Harvard is offering you something I never had the chance to experience," Tasha explained carefully. "An opportunity to develop your gifts without limits." "Would we live there?" Zara asked, uncertainty in her voice. "Part-time with supervision," Tasha explained. "I'd never be far away." "Are you sending us away because you and Dad are fighting?" Zoe asked directly, her perception cutting to the heart of the matter. Tasha pulled both girls into a tight embrace. "Never. You two are everything to me. This is about giving you wings to become whatever you want to be." "Scientists," they answered in unison. "The kind that change the world," Zara added. "You already are," Tasha whispered, holding them close. That night, after tucking the twins into bed, Tasha returned to her home office and opened the secret folder on her computer. Robert Thompson's face filled the screen, a recent photograph from a police department charity gala. He stood confidently in his dress uniform, looking every inch the respected public servant. Tasha traced her finger along the screen, not touching his image but following its outline. The girls had his eyes, his sharp cheekbones. Evidence of his existence lived in their DNA, in their faces she loved so dearly. Malcolm appeared in the doorway, his expression resigned as he observed his wife studying the image of another man. Neither spoke. The distance between them seemed to expand with each passing second. Finally, Malcolm broke the silence. "You need to decide what matters more, the life we've built together, or the ghost of what he did to you." Tasha closed the laptop, but the damage was done. As she looked at her husband's retreating back, she wondered if her success, everything she had built, was still fundamentally defined by that moment of rejection on a rainy Chicago sidewalk. While Tasha observed the archive with photos and news about Robert Thompson, she didn't imagine that in just 4 years she would be face to face with him, not as the abandoned young woman, but as the CEO of a company whose system he would be forced to purchase. While Tasha observed the archive with photos and news about Robert Thompson, she didn't imagine that in just 4 years she would be face to face with him. Yet life's trajectory had accelerated beyond anyone's predictions. The Chicago skyline glittered beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows of Tasha's penthouse apartment. At 36, she had finally permitted herself certain luxuries, this spacious lakefront residence being the most significant. The view was breathtaking, especially at sunset when golden light bathed the urban landscape. But tonight, the beauty outside couldn't pierce the solitude within. Tasha swirled the Cabernet in her glass, watching the ruby liquid catch the light. 3 years had passed since her marriage to Malcolm had ended. The divorce had been amicable, perhaps the most civilized dissolution of a relationship in Chicago's history. They had separated assets cleanly, maintained their professional partnership at Horizon, and created a supportive environment for the twins despite their personal fracture. Her laptop chimed with an incoming video call. Tasha smoothed her silk blouse before accepting, and immediately the screen filled with the faces of her daughters. 13 now, their features maturing into a striking blend of her determination and Robert's aristocratic bone structure. "Mom, we just got approval for our neural network patent," Zoe exclaimed, her excitement palpable even through the digital connection. "Professor Kaminsky says it could revolutionize how emergency systems predict resource allocation," Zara added, pushing her glasses up in a gesture that reminded Tasha of herself. "That's incredible, girls," Tasha replied, masking the loneliness that always accompanied these calls. "I'm so proud of you both." Their conversation continued. Academic achievements, social challenges, upcoming conferences. The twins thrived at Harvard's special program, though they remained somewhat isolated from peers, their exceptional intellects creating an invisible barrier even among other gifted students. After the call ended, Tasha's apartment felt emptier than before. She walked to the window, pressing her palm against the cool glass. Horizon Communications now occupied 6 floors in a prestigious downtown building, employed 460 people across offices in 6 cities, and had revolutionized emergency response systems in 20 states. Yet success felt hollow without someone to share it. The following morning, Tasha met Malcolm for their weekly leadership breakfast at an upscale restaurant near the Horizon headquarters. Despite their divorce, they maintained not only a professional relationship but a genuine friendship that had survived the dissolution of their marriage. "I signed the final divorce papers yesterday," Malcolm mentioned casually, stirring his coffee. "My lawyer will send copies to yours." Tasha nodded, appreciating his direct approach. "Thank you. I've already told the finance team there will be no changes to the company structure or leadership." "Never doubted that." Malcolm's smile was warm but held a hint of sadness. "How are the girls?" "Brilliant as ever. Just secured another patent." Their conversation shifted to business matters, expansion plans, hiring needs, financial projections. Horizon had become a powerhouse, valued at $300 million according to their latest funding round. Emergency services departments across the country competed for implementation contracts. As they finished breakfast, Malcolm hesitated before asking, "Have you been keeping tabs on him still?" Tasha didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Occasionally." "He's risen quickly in the department," Malcolm observed neutrally. "Commissioner assistant now, I believe." "Yes," Tasha replied, not elaborating on how intimately she knew Robert's career trajectory. Back at Horizon headquarters, Tasha's executive team had gathered in the main conference room. Andrea, now Chief Operating Officer, was reviewing the latest contract opportunities when a particular slide caught Tasha's attention. "Chicago Department of Emergency Management?" Tasha read aloud, her pulse quickening. "They're issuing an RFP? Complete modernization of their emergency response systems," Andrea confirmed. 8 figures minimum. Would be our largest municipal contract to date. Tasha maintained her composure, but internally, a storm of emotions brewed. Chicago, her home, where she had been dismissed and underestimated, where Robert Thompson now served as commissioner assistant overseeing public safety initiatives. Who would oversee the implementation from their side? She asked, keeping her tone casual. Final approval would go through the commissioner assistant's office, Andrea replied. So Thompson, I believe. The room continued discussing technical specifications and competitive advantages, unaware of the personal significance this contract held for their CEO. Tasha remained professionally engaged, but her mind raced ahead to the possibilities this opportunity presented. That evening, alone in her office, Tasha pulled up the Chicago Police Department's organizational chart. There he was. Robert Thompson, commissioner assistant, his official photograph showing a distinguished man in uniform, silver beginning to appear at his temples. According to the accompanying biography, he had left the family real estate business to pursue public service, a calling he had discovered in his 30s. A convenient rebranding, Tasha murmured to herself. Her phone buzzed with breaking news alerts. Early reports of a novel respiratory virus in Asia were escalating into concerns about potential global spread. Tasha skimmed the article, then set her phone aside, unaware of how this developing situation would soon transform both Horizon's trajectory and her inevitable collision course with Robert. Within weeks, the world changed dramatically. COVID-19 swept across continents, overwhelming healthcare systems and emergency response networks. Horizon's leadership team gathered for daily crisis meetings, rapidly pivoting their technology to address the pandemic's unique challenges. We need to adapt our system for pandemic response tracking, Tasha directed during one such meeting. Contact tracing, hospital capacity monitoring, resource allocation for testing sites, everything integrated with existing emergency services. The team worked around the clock, developing new modules and functionalities. Tasha led from the front, coding alongside her engineers, sometimes sleeping on the office couch rather than returning to her empty penthouse. Their efforts paid off spectacularly. Within 60 days, Horizon had created the most comprehensive pandemic response management system on the market. Governors began calling Tasha directly, desperate for implementation. Emergency management offices that had previously hesitated now fast-tracked approvals. We've received 17 new state-level inquiries this week alone, Andrea reported during a virtual meeting, and the White House task force has requested a demonstration. Horizon's valuation soared to $800 million almost overnight. Financial news outlets featured Tasha's journey from dispatch operator to tech mogul, highlighting how her unique background had positioned Horizon to respond effectively to the crisis. Amid this whirlwind of success, the Chicago RFP remained a focal point for Tasha. The proposal deadline approached as her team finalized their bid, the most comprehensive and competitive they had ever assembled. There's one detail we need to discuss, Tasha mentioned to Malcolm during a private strategy session. My name. Your name? Malcolm questioned. On the Chicago proposal, I think we should limit my visibility. Use corporate officers' signatures where possible. Minimize mentions of the CEO. Malcolm studied her face. Because of him. Because I want this bid judged on its merits, Tasha replied carefully. Not potentially rejected because of personal history. You think he'd do that? Reject superior technology out of spite? I don't know what he'd do, Tasha admitted, but I'm not willing to risk it. This contract matters too much. Malcolm didn't press further, understanding the complexity of emotions involved. The proposal was submitted with Tasha's name appearing only where legally required, buried in corporate documentation rather than highlighted in presentations. 2 months later, as the pandemic tightened its grip on the nation, the announcement came. Horizon Communications had won the Chicago contract, $4.2 million for complete system modernization. The decision had been unanimous among the selection committee, with final approval from Commissioner Assistant Thompson's office. He had no idea, Tasha whispered to herself, looking at the signed contract with Robert's authorizing signature at the bottom. The implementation proceeded remotely due to pandemic restrictions. Tasha monitored the Chicago project closely but maintained her distance, working through project managers rather than participating in client meetings. The system went live ahead of schedule, immediately improving the city's emergency response capabilities during a critical period of the health crisis. Throughout the pandemic's darkest months, Tasha maintained regular video calls with the twins, who had transitioned to remote learning but continued their extraordinary academic progress. At 14, they were completing doctoral-level research in computational neuroscience while developing new algorithms for Horizon in their spare time. "When can we come home?" Zara asked during one call, a rare moment of vulnerability from the usually composed teenager. "As soon as travel restrictions ease," Tasha promised. "I miss you both so much." The loneliness of her personal life stood in stark contrast to her professional success. Magazines featured Horizon's pandemic response technology, industry awards accumulated, acquisition offers arrived with increasingly astronomical figures. Through it all, Tasha maintained her independence, refusing to relinquish control of the company she had built from nothing. Late one night, as Tasha reviewed the latest performance metrics from the Chicago implementation, an email arrived from the National Public Safety Association. She had been named Innovator of the Year for Horizon's contributions during the pandemic, with a formal award presentation scheduled at their annual conference in Boston the following spring. Curious, she opened the attachment listing other honorees and speakers. Her heart seemed to stop momentarily as she read, "Featured speaker, Robert Thompson, Chief of Police, Chicago Police Department." Not Commissioner Assistant any longer, he had been promoted again. "Tasha?" Malcolm's voice startled her. He had entered her office unannounced, a habit from their married days that occasionally resurfaced. "He'll be there," she said simply, turning her laptop to show him the conference agenda. "In Boston, as a featured speaker." Malcolm studied the information, then met her gaze directly. "Are you still pursuing justice or revenge?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Tasha considered it seriously before responding. "Neither," she said finally. "I'm pursuing closure, for myself and for the girls." "The girls," Malcolm repeated. "Are you planning to tell them? To introduce them?" Tasha turned to the window, looking out at the city lights. "They have a right to know their history, to see the man who contributed to their DNA, if nothing else." "And what about him? Does he have rights in this scenario?" Tasha's expression hardened momentarily. "He forfeited his rights 15 years ago on that sidewalk." As preparations for the Boston conference began, Tasha made a momentous decision. She would not only attend to accept her award, but would bring the twins with her. At 15, they were old enough to understand their origin story, to see with adult eyes the man who had rejected them before birth. Looking at photographs of her daughters graduating with their doctorates at an age when most children were just entering high school, Tasha felt a fierce pride mingled with anticipation. Robert Thompson would finally see what he had thrown away, not just Tasha, but these extraordinary young women who carried his eyes and his intelligence, refined and elevated beyond anything the Thompson family had produced. While signing the contract with the city of Chicago, carefully hiding her name from public documents, Tasha didn't imagine that in a few months she would be face to face with Robert on a national stage, ready to reveal the truth he had tried to bury for 15 years. While signing the contract with the city of Chicago, carefully hiding her name from public documents, Tasha couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous was approaching. The electronic ping of her email brought her back to the present. Another notification from the National Public Safety Association about the upcoming conference in Boston. "Innovator of the Year," she murmured, still finding it difficult to absorb the title they had bestowed upon her. The award recognized Horizon's revolutionary impact during the pandemic, when their systems had saved countless lives by optimizing emergency response resources across the country. Tasha opened the attached conference schedule, scrolling through the list of speakers and panelists. Her heart skipped when she reached the featured presenters section. Chief Robert Thompson, Chicago Police Department, Innovative Approaches to Urban Crime Reduction. The official photograph accompanying his bio showed a distinguished man in his early 40s, silver threads at his temples adding gravitas to his appearance. The uniform fit him perfectly, medals gleaming on his chest, the very picture of respectability and public service. "Rebranded yourself completely, haven't you?" she whispered to the image on her screen. A soft chime from her laptop interrupted her thoughts, an incoming video call from Cambridge. Tasha quickly closed the conference document before accepting the call. "Mom." The screen filled with the identical faces of her daughters, now 14 years old and more stunning each time she saw them. Despite being separated by a pandemic, they had flourished in Harvard's accelerated program, their minds racing ahead of even their advanced curriculum. "How are my brilliant girls?" Tasha asked, her voice softening as it always did when speaking to them. "We just finished the quantum cryptography module 2 weeks ahead of schedule," Zoe reported, her green eyes, so like Robert's, bright with excitement. "And the department chair wants to publish our paper on predictive emergency resource allocation," Zara added. "They say it could change how cities prepare for mass casualty events." Pride swelled in Tasha's chest. "That's incredible. You're both extraordinary." After discussing their academic achievements, Tasha took a deep breath. "I have news. I've been named Innovator of the Year by the National Public Safety Association. The ceremony is in Boston next month." "Mom, that's amazing!" the twins exclaimed in unison. "I want you both to come with me," Tasha continued, her heart beating faster. "The pandemic restrictions are easing, and it's time we were together again." "Of course we'll come," Zara replied immediately. "We wouldn't miss it," Zoe agreed, then tilted her head curiously. "But why do you look so serious? This is a good thing, right?" Tasha hesitated, knowing this moment would forever alter their understanding of themselves. "There's something else. Someone who will be at the conference that I think it's time you knew about." "Who?" they asked simultaneously, their synchronicity still remarkable even after all these years. "Your biological father." Silence fell, heavy and immediate. The twins exchanged one of their inscrutable looks, a silent communication that even Tasha couldn't fully decipher. "Robert Thompson," Zoe stated rather than asked, surprising Tasha with her certainty. "How did you—" "We've known his name since we were 12, Zara explained calmly. "We found your secure folder when we were upgrading your encryption protocols. We've read every article, studied every photograph," Zoe continued. "We know he's chief of police in Chicago now." "And that he abandoned you when you were pregnant," Zara added, her voice hardening slightly. Tasha sat back, momentarily speechless. They had carried this knowledge for years without revealing it, protecting her from the pain of the conversation just as she had tried to protect them. "Why didn't you say anything?" she finally asked. "We were waiting for you to be ready," Zoe replied simply. The following morning, Tasha invited Malcolm to her office to discuss the situation. Despite their divorce, he remained her closest confidant and the only person who fully understood the complexity of her history with Robert. "The girls already knew," she told him, still processing this revelation. "They found my research folder years ago." Malcolm nodded thoughtfully. They're remarkable young women, Tasha, far more emotionally mature than their age would suggest. But am I doing the right thing? Bringing them to a conference where they'll come face to face with the man who rejected them before they were born? That's not a question I can answer, Malcolm replied carefully. But I do think at some point, truth is necessary for healing, for all of you. The weeks leading up to the conference passed in a flurry of preparation. The twins flew to Chicago for the first time in over a year, bringing with them an energy that immediately transformed Tasha's penthouse from a sophisticated but lonely space into a home again. The evening before their departure for Boston, Tasha found the girls in the guest room they shared, examining their reflections in the full-length mirror. They had chosen identical outfits for the journey: tailored navy blazers, crisp white blouses, and sleek trousers. "We want everyone to know we're sisters," Zoe explained when she noticed Tasha watching. "And your daughters," Zara added with quiet determination. That night, unable to sleep, Tasha stood at her bedroom window overlooking the Chicago skyline. 15 years had passed since that rain-soaked day when Robert had tossed money at her feet. 15 years of struggle, determination, and ultimately triumph. She had built an empire worth $800 million, raised 2 extraordinary daughters, and transformed the very industry that had once dismissed her. Yet despite all these achievements, a part of her still felt like that frightened young woman, picking up soggy bills from the pavement, humiliation burning through her. "Not anymore," she whispered to her reflection in the glass. "Not ever again." The Boston Marriott gleamed with polished marble and brass fixtures as Tasha and her daughters entered the lobby. Conference attendees milled about, ID badges announcing their affiliations, federal agencies, state police departments, technology firms specializing in security. "Ms. Williams-Carter!" The conference coordinator hurried toward them, hand extended. "We're so honored to have you with us. Your suite is ready, and the tech team has prepared everything for your keynote tomorrow." Tasha introduced the twins, whose poised handshakes and articulate responses immediately impressed the coordinator. "Your VIP credentials give you access to all sessions," the woman explained, handing them embossed badge holders, "including tonight's welcome reception." As they rode the elevator to their suite, Zara turned to Tasha. "Will he be at the reception tonight?" "According to the schedule, yes," Tasha replied, her stomach tightening at the thought. "Are we going?" Zoe asked. Tasha studied her daughters' faces, so young yet so composed. "That's up to you. We don't have to if you're not ready." The twins exchanged one of their silent communications before Zara answered for both of them. "We want to go. It's time." The presidential suite offered breathtaking views of Boston Harbor, its luxury a stark contrast to the tiny apartment in Englewood where Tasha had once struggled to afford diapers. As the twins explored the space, exclaiming over the amenities, Tasha's phone buzzed with a text from Malcolm. "Whatever happens, remember you've already won." The welcome reception filled the hotel's grand ballroom with a sea of dark suits and polished shoes. Security professionals from across the country networked over cocktails and hors d'oeuvres, their conversations a buzz of technical terminology and policy discussions. Tasha chose her outfit deliberately, a crimson power suit that had been featured in Boston Magazine's Women of Influence spread earlier that year. The twins flanked her in their matching navy ensembles, their resemblance to each other, and to Robert, unmistakable to anyone who knew to look. "There he is," Zoe murmured, her gaze fixed on a point across the room. Tasha followed her daughter's line of sight. Robert Thompson stood in a circle of admiring colleagues, his police dress uniform adorned with commendations, his posture radiating authority. He laughed at something someone said, his head thrown back in that familiar way that once made Tasha's heart skip. "He looks like the photographs," Zara observed quietly. "Are you both okay?" Tasha asked, suddenly protective. "We're fine," they answered in unison, their composure remarkable. As they made their way through the crowd, Tasha felt the shift in the room's energy. People recognized her, conversations paused, heads turned. The innovator of the year was a significant presence, and her striking twin daughters only added to the intrigue. Ms. Williams Carter greeted the Secretary of Homeland Security, approaching with hand extended. Your pandemic response system saved countless lives last year. We're implementing it nationwide next quarter. Others joined the conversation, eager to meet the woman who had revolutionized emergency communications. The twins participated seamlessly, explaining complex technological concepts with clarity that belied their age. From across the room, Tasha felt Robert's gaze land on her. The moment stretched, recognition dawning in his expression, confusion, then shock as his eyes moved to the twins standing beside her. The glass of whiskey in his hand tilted dangerously as his attention fixed on the identical girls with eyes so unmistakably like his own. "Excuse me," Tasha said to her admirers. "I need to speak with my daughters privately for a moment." They moved to a quieter corner of the ballroom. "He's seen us," Tasha said softly. "You don't have to speak with him tonight. Tomorrow's soon enough." "We know," Zoe replied calmly. "But he looks like he's seen a ghost." "Let him wonder," Zara added, a hint of her mother's steel in her voice. Throughout the evening, Tasha kept Robert in her peripheral vision. He appeared distracted during conversations, his eyes repeatedly finding their small group across the room. When the secretary introduced him to several federal officials, he nearly missed the handshake, his attention divided. As the reception wound down, Tasha and the twins prepared to return to their suite. At the elevator bank, Robert finally made his move, approaching with visible nervousness, an expression Tasha had never seen on his face during their relationship. "Tasha," he said, his voice carrying the slight rasp that comes with age. "I didn't expect to see you here." She turned, meeting his gaze with perfect composure. "Chief Thompson, congratulations on your promotion." His eyes moved from her face to the twins, who studied him with identical analytical gazes. "These are," he began, unable to complete the question. "My daughters," Tasha replied simply. "Zoe and Zara Williams Carter. They've just completed their doctorates in computer science at Harvard." Confusion crossed his features. "But they're so young." "They're exceptional," Tasha replied, a lifetime of pride in those two words. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, saving them from further conversation. "We have a busy day tomorrow," Tasha said, stepping inside with the twins. "I'm sure we'll see you at the sessions." As the doors closed, she caught a final glimpse of Robert's face, pale with shock, his eyes fixed on the twins' retreating forms. In their suite, Zara finally showed her first sign of emotion, her hands trembling slightly. "He doesn't know who we really are, does he?" "No," Tasha confirmed, drawing both girls into her arms. "But tomorrow, during my acceptance speech, everyone will know exactly who you are and what he threw away." Observing Robert Thompson from across the Saguenay, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit him, Tasha felt 15 years of planning culminating in this moment, without knowing that the confrontation would be even more explosive than she had ever imagined. Observing Robert Thompson from across the Saguenay, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit him, Tasha felt 15 years of planning culminating in this moment. The grand ballroom of the Boston Convention Center buzzed with anticipation on the first morning of the conference. Security professionals, technology vendors, and law enforcement officials from across the country mingled before the opening sessions, creating a low hum of conversation that filled the ornate space. Tasha adjusted the lapel of her tailored crimson suit, a sharp contrast to the second-hand clothes she once wore to job interviews, and watched her daughters emerge from the ladies' room. At 15, the twins carried themselves with a confidence that turned heads. Their matching charcoal pantsuits, custom-tailored by the same designer who dressed tech executives and celebrities, emphasized their identical features while projecting sophisticated professionalism far beyond their years. "Ready?" Tasha asked, her voice steady despite the emotional maelstrom within. "More than ready," they replied in unison, a habit that still occasionally startled strangers. As they entered the main hall, a noticeable ripple of recognition spread through the crowd. Tasha Williams Carter was no longer just a name on a conference program. She was the CEO whose technology had revolutionized emergency response during a global pandemic. People nudged one another, whispering as she passed. Near the front of the room, Robert Thompson stood at a podium, reviewing his notes before his presentation. He looked every inch the distinguished public servant, tailored uniform adorned with commendations, silver-flecked hair perfectly styled, his posture radiating authority. The confidence that had once charmed Tasha now seemed brittle to her experienced eye, a carefully constructed facade. "That's him," whispered Zara unnecessarily as they found their seats in the VIP section, directly in Robert's line of sight. The Secretary of Homeland Security approached their row, extending his hand to Tasha. "Ms. Williams Carter, an honor to have you with us. Your keynote tomorrow is the most anticipated session of the conference." "Thank you, Mr. Secretary," Tasha replied, introducing her daughters with evident pride. "Dr. Zoe and Dr. Zara Williams Carter, my daughters and collaborators." The Secretary's eyebrows rose. "Doctors already? Remarkable." Robert looked up from his notes at that moment, his gaze locking with Tasha's across the room. She held his stare steadily, feeling none of the intimidation that had once defined their power dynamic. His eyes shifted to the twins beside her, lingering on their faces with visible discomfort before returning to his presentation materials. The conference director approached the podium, tapping the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the National Public Safety Association's annual conference. We're honored to begin with a presentation on urban crime reduction strategies from Chicago's Chief of Police, Robert Thompson." Applause filled the room as Robert took the podium. He cleared his throat before launching into his prepared remarks, his voice carrying confidently through the sound system. "Chicago has implemented a multifaceted approach to reducing violent crime," he began, clicking through his first slides showing impressive statistical improvements. "Central to our success has been the implementation of advanced communication systems that dramatically reduce response times." Tasha felt a surge of bitter amusement. The advanced communication systems he referenced so proudly were her creation, Horizon's technology that he had purchased without knowing its source. "Our response times have decreased by 58% in just 12 months, Robert continued, moving to his next slide. "This improvement alone has saved hundreds of—" His voice faltered as he looked up and once again caught sight of Tasha and the twins. The words died in his throat, a momentary but noticeable lapse that caused a few audience members to exchange puzzled glances. "Hundreds of lives," he recovered, swallowing visibly. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead as he fumbled with his water glass, spilling some onto his notes. "Excuse me." For the remainder of his presentation, Robert struggled to maintain his composure. His eyes repeatedly drifted to the three women in the front row, losing his place several times. The confident law enforcement leader had been replaced by a distracted, uncomfortable man who couldn't escape the green-eyed gaze of the young women who so clearly carried his genetic imprint. Tasha maintained steady eye contact whenever he looked their way, a slight smile playing at her lips. She recognized the power shift. 15 years ago, she had been the vulnerable one, desperate for his acknowledgement. Now he was the one thrown off balance by her mere presence. When the presentation concluded to polite applause, Robert hurriedly gathered his materials, nearly dropping his tablet in his haste to exit the stage. Audience members approached him with questions, but his responses were distracted, his attention clearly elsewhere. "He's completely rattled," Zoe observed quietly. "Good," replied Zara, her tone carrying a hardness unusual for her analytical nature. The morning sessions continued with presentations on various security technologies and policies. During the coffee break, Tasha found herself surrounded by admirers, police chiefs, emergency management directors, and security consultants eager to discuss Horizon's innovations. "Your system saved our department millions in the first year alone," enthused the Dallas Emergency Services director. "And the pandemic response module was a game changer." From across the atrium, Robert watched this scene unfold. Tasha at the center of an admiring crowd, her daughters engaging confidently with high-ranking officials. The contrast to the frightened pregnant student he had dismissed could not have been more stark. When the luncheon began, the seating arrangement placed Robert at a table adjacent to Tasha's. Throughout the meal, he picked at his food, his attention repeatedly drawn to their conversation. The twins discussed complex technological concepts with federal officials, their vocabulary and insight causing visible surprise among the seasoned professionals at their table. "Your daughters are extraordinary," commented the woman seated beside Tasha, the director of FEMA. "Harvard doctorates at 15? I've never heard of such achievement. They developed the neural mapping component of our system when they were 13, Tasha replied, loud enough for Robert to overhear. Their algorithm improved location accuracy by 28%. Robert dropped his fork with a clatter, drawing momentary attention from nearby tables. His complexion had paled noticeably, his eyes fixed on the twins as realization seemed to dawn more fully with each passing moment. The afternoon sessions progressed with Robert becoming increasingly agitated. During panel discussions, his contributions were disjointed and unfocused. At one point, when asked directly about Chicago's implementation of the Horizon system, he stumbled through his answer while avoiding eye contact with Tasha. "It's been extremely effective," he managed. "The technology is quite advanced." "Perhaps Ms. Williams-Carter could add some insight," suggested the moderator, gesturing to Tasha in the audience, "since Chicago uses your company's system." Tasha rose smoothly, accepting the offered microphone. "The Chicago implementation was particularly gratifying for Horizon," she replied, her voice steady and professional. "Chief Thompson's department has been an excellent partner, though our interactions have been primarily through his technical staff." Her pointed comment, indicating they had not directly worked together, caused Robert to shift uncomfortably in his seat. The power dynamic in the room was palpable, with Tasha clearly commanding the greater respect and authority. As the final session ended, attendees filtered into the grand reception hall for the evening networking event. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the elegant space as waitstaff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Tasha and the twins created an imposing trio as they entered. 3 generations of the same striking features, dressed impeccably, moving with synchronized confidence. Conversation momentarily paused as people took note of their arrival. "Ms. Williams-Carter," called out the conference director, approaching with a distinguished group. "The secretary would like to introduce you to some key stakeholders." For the next hour, Tasha moved through the reception with the ease of someone accustomed to high-level networking. The twins remained close, engaging intelligently in every conversation, their remarkable achievements a constant topic of amazed commentary. Robert hovered at the periphery, nursing a whiskey that remained mostly untouched. His eyes followed their progress through the room, his discomfort visible even from a distance. When a colleague approached to discuss Chicago police matters, his responses were distracted and abrupt. Finally, as the evening progressed, Robert gathered his courage and intercepted Tasha as she moved between conversation groups. "Tasha," he said, his voice lower than during their brief exchange the previous night. "Could we speak privately for a moment?" She regarded him coolly, aware of curious eyes watching their interaction. "Chief Thompson, your presentation this morning was interesting." "Please," he said, an unfamiliar note of desperation in his voice. "Just 5 minutes." "I'm quite busy," she replied, gesturing to the room full of influential contacts. "As you can see." "Those young women," he pressed, lowering his voice further. Are they my daughters?" Tasha supplied, her tone perfectly controlled. "Yes. Zoe and Zara. Brilliant, aren't they?" "They look like my mother," Robert said abruptly, the observation escaping him involuntarily. The eyes especially, the Thompson eyes. "Genetic coincidence, I suppose," Tasha replied with deliberate ambiguity. "The eyes are quite distinctive." At that moment, the twins approached, their timing impeccable as always. "Mom, MIT wants to schedule a meeting about our neural mapping technology," Zara announced, then acknowledged Robert with a cool nod. "Chief Thompson." "Girls," Tasha said smoothly, "Chief Thompson was just commenting on how extraordinary you both are." Robert extended a trembling hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you." "Likewise," they responded in perfect unison, their handshakes brief and formal. "Your system," Robert managed, desperate to maintain the conversation. "It saved many lives in Chicago. We're very impressed with the technology." "And it only cost your department $4.2 million, Tasha interjected with a razor-sharp smile. "Money well spent, wouldn't you say? Certainly more than $200 thrown on the ground." The color drained from Robert's face as the reference landed with devastating precision. "Tasha, can we please speak somewhere private? I think we have things to discuss." "I don't see why," she replied, her voice hardening slightly. "Our relationship is strictly professional now. Your city buys my technology. End of story." As she turned to leave, Robert reached out impulsively, grasping her arm. "I have rights," he hissed urgently. "They're my daughters too." Tasha's eyes flashed dangerously as she pulled her arm free. "You renounced any rights when you said we were my problem. Remember that day, Robert? I remember every word." Tasha's eyes flashed dangerously as she pulled her arm free. "You renounced any rights when you said we were my problem. Remember that day, Robert? I remember every word." The confrontation left Tasha shaken, though she maintained her composure as she guided her daughters away from Robert's desperate presence. Throughout the remainder of the evening, she felt his eyes following them across the reception hall, his face a portrait of dawning recognition and dismay. Later that night, in the privacy of their suite, Zara placed a comforting hand on Tasha's shoulder. "Are you okay, Mom?" "I've been preparing for this moment for 15 years, Tasha replied, gazing out at Boston's twinkling skyline. "Yet I still wasn't ready for how it would feel." "He knows now," Zoe observed, perching on the arm of her mother's chair, "that we're his daughters." "Yes," Tasha confirmed, "and tomorrow everyone else will know too." Morning brought clear skies and a sense of inevitability. The final day of the conference featured Tasha's keynote address and award acceptance as the culminating event. As they prepared in their suite, the twins were unusually quiet, each lost in contemplation of what was to come. Tasha chose her outfit with deliberate care, an elegant white suit that radiated confidence and purity, a stark contrast to the dark, rain-soaked clothes she'd worn that day on the Chicago sidewalk. Her jewelry was minimal but expensive, each piece a milestone marker from her journey: diamond earrings purchased after Horizon's first $1 million contract, a platinum watch commemorating their 100th million valuation. The grand ballroom had been reconfigured for the closing ceremony, with a stage and podium at the front. Rows of chairs filled quickly as attendees gathered for the conference's signature event. Robert sat rigidly in the front row, surrounded by other chiefs of police, his complexion ashen despite his efforts to appear composed. The Secretary of Homeland Security approached the podium as the room settled into attentive silence. "Our final speaker has revolutionized emergency communications in America," he began, his voice resonating through the sophisticated sound system. "Her technology has saved an estimated 40,000 lives in the past 5 years alone. It is my great honor to present the Innovator of the Year award to Tasha Williams Carter, CEO of Horizon Communications." Applause thundered through the room as Tasha rose gracefully from her seat in the VIP section. The twins flanked her as she approached the stage, remaining poised at the bottom of the steps as their mother ascended alone to accept the Crystal Award. "Thank you," Tasha began, her voice strong and clear. This recognition means a great deal, not just to me but to everyone at Horizon who works tirelessly to improve emergency response systems." She paused, looking out over the audience, her gaze briefly meeting Robert's. He sat completely still, hands clenched on his knees, visibly bracing himself. "My journey began in a Chicago emergency dispatch center," Tasha continued, her tone shifting to something more personal. "I was earning $12 an hour, pregnant with twins, having been forced to drop out of law school. One night I took a call where we couldn't locate the victim in time. I promised myself that no other family would experience that if I could help it." She paused, allowing the human element of her story to resonate. Several audience members nodded in sympathy. "What I haven't shared publicly before is the circumstance that led me to that dispatch center." Her eyes found Robert's again, holding his gaze deliberately. "I was rejected countless times, told that a single mother without a degree couldn't create a technology company, that a black woman from the South Side didn't belong in the world of government contracts and multi-million-dollar deals." The room had grown absolutely silent, captivated by the personal revelation from a woman typically known for her professional reserve. "15 years ago, a man told me I wasn't worth more than some loose cash tossed on the ground," Tasha continued, her voice unwavering despite the emotion behind her words. "That I and the babies I carried deserved nothing from him." A murmur rippled through the audience. In the front row, Robert's face drained of all remaining color. "That man is in this room today," she said, not pointing or looking directly at Robert, but making her meaning unmistakable. "He leads a police department that recently spent $4.2 million on Horizon technology, a system created by the woman he discarded and perfected by the daughters he rejected before birth." The murmur became a wave of whispers as heads turned, seeking the subject of her revelation. Robert remained frozen in his seat, a statue of mortification. "This isn't about revenge," Tasha clarified, her voice softening. "It's about transformation, about showing other women that rejection isn't the end of their story, but possibly the beginning of a much better one." She gestured toward the twins, who ascended the steps to join her on stage. "I'd like to introduce Dr. Zoe and Dr. Zara Williams-Carter, 15 years old, both holding doctorates in computer science from Harvard, the architects of Horizon's neural mapping algorithm that has improved emergency response accuracy by 28%. Stunned silence gave way to hesitant applause, then building to thunderous recognition as the audience processed the extraordinary achievement of these young women. Camera flashes erupted as journalists captured the moment. "Together," Tasha concluded, "we're announcing today the creation of a $50 million fund to support single mothers in technology, to ensure that talent isn't lost because of circumstance, and that no woman has to choose between her children and her dreams." As the audience rose in standing ovation, reporters began moving toward Robert's seat, recognition dawning on their faces. He stood abruptly, looking for an escape route, but found himself surrounded by cameras and extended microphones. "Chief Thompson, are you the father Ms. Williams-Carter referenced?" called one journalist. "Is it true you abandoned her during pregnancy?" shouted another. Robert pushed past them without answering, his face contorted with panic as he fled toward the exit. On stage, the twins stood proudly beside their mother, matching expressions of dignified composure on their faces. When they finally descended amid continued applause, they were immediately surrounded by admirers and well-wishers. "You never told us about the fund," Zara whispered to Tasha as they moved through the crowd. "I wanted it to be a surprise," Tasha replied, "for you and for him." By evening, the story had exploded across media platforms. "Chicago Police Chief Exposed Abandoned Pregnancy of Genius Twins" read the headline on the Chicago Tribune's website. Cable news ran side-by-side photographs of Robert in his police uniform, alongside images of Tasha and the twins at the conference, highlighting the identical green eyes that connected them genetically. The following morning, Tasha's phone rang continuously with interview requests and messages of support. The Chicago Police Department issued a terse statement announcing an internal investigation into possible impropriety regarding the Horizon contract approval, focusing on undisclosed conflicts of interest. 3 days after returning to Chicago, Tasha received a message from Robert's assistant requesting a meeting. She agreed to a private dinner at a discreet restaurant known for its secluded booths and high-profile clientele. "Should we come with you?" the twins asked when she told them about the meeting. "Not this time," Tasha replied, "but soon. This is just the beginning of a conversation that's 15 years overdue." The restaurant's hushed atmosphere enveloped Tasha as she was led to a corner booth where Robert already waited. He stood when she approached, his usual confidence replaced by visible anxiety. His appearance had deteriorated noticeably, hair unkempt, dark circles under his eyes, his normally immaculate suit slightly rumpled. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice hoarse as they sat. "What did you want to discuss, Robert?" Tasha asked, maintaining the professional demeanor that had become her armor. "I was young and stupid," he began, eyes fixed on his untouched water glass. "My family had expectations. I was afraid of disappointing them. But now I want to make amends. I want to be part of their lives." After 15 years of silence, Tasha raised an eyebrow. "I didn't know," he insisted, leaning forward. "I had no idea they existed as they are, such extraordinary young women." "You knew I was pregnant," Tasha countered. "You chose to throw money at the problem and walk away." "I was wrong," Robert admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "Terribly wrong. But please, I want to know them now, to be their father." Tasha studied him, seeing not the powerful police chief but the frightened man beneath, suddenly confronting the magnitude of what he had discarded. "I have resources," he continued desperately, "connections that could help them, family history they should know." A slight smile touched Tasha's lips. "Resources? The Horizon valuation surpassed your family's entire fortune 3 years ago, Robert. And as for connections, your daughters had dinner with the president last month during a young scientist's recognition event." Robert's face fell further. "It's not about money," he insisted. "It's about blood ties, about family." "Family?" Tasha repeated, her voice hardening. "Where were you when Zoe had pneumonia at 6 years old? When Zara broke her arm falling from a playground structure? When they presented their first science project and won national recognition?" "I didn't know." "Because you chose not to know," Tasha finished for him. "You made your decision 15 years ago on that sidewalk." She gathered her purse, preparing to leave. The meeting had confirmed what she already suspected. His interest came not from genuine remorse, but from the shock of discovering what he had lost. "Please," Robert pleaded, his desperation now unmistakable, "give me a chance to know them." Tasha paused, regarding him with something approaching pity. "You know what's ironic, Robert? For years I nurtured this anger, dreaming of the moment I could throw my success in your face. But now that it's here, I feel nothing. You're no longer important to me." "What about the girls?" he asked, grasping at his last hope. "They have a right to know their father." "They're adults now, despite their age," Tasha replied evenly. "They can decide if they want you in their lives." She placed her hand on the booth's edge, leaning slightly closer. "But remember this, you rejected them when they were just a possibility. They have every right to reject you now that they're an extraordinary reality." As Tasha walked out of the restaurant, leaving Robert alone at the table, she felt a profound sense of completion. The circle had closed. The frightened young woman picking up soggy bills from a rain-soaked sidewalk had transformed into someone powerful enough to walk away on her own terms. In the parking lot, Zoe's question from the car awaited her. "How do you feel, Mom?" Tasha looked toward the Chicago skyline, the city that had once rejected her and now celebrated her success. "Free," she answered. "Finally free." If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.